Welcome to Badass Lady Folk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. In this episode, I'm so happy to bring Madeline Trice. Hi.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing all right. Settling in,
Dealing with the change of seasons.
Yeah.
Coping.
The early dark is really getting to me. I feel like once you start transitioning to it being dark at 6 o'clock, it's so hard to stay awake.
Yeah. No, I deal with that too. And I love almost everything about the fall, but the shorter days.
Yeah.
Not among those things.
But other than that, it's gorgeous. All the colored leaves and all over the place. Love it.
Okay, enough of the weather. And now on to something a little bit more graphic. So you are a writer. And a writer of fiction and poetry and essays and probably other things.
Anything they'll let me get my hands on.
Yeah. So you have a piece that you wanted to share this episode. I'd love to hear it.
I wrote it out so I can read it without screens. All right. This is Under the Fluorescent Lights. It starts with an urge, a bodily inevitability sinking in your gut. By the time the deadbolt on the stall door slides into place with a soft, oily click, it's settled into a warm throb. Back on the road, when the rumble of the machine was beneath you, the mounting pressure could not spare a moment. But now, with skin bared, pants around ankles, it leaves you wanting. Bent over, nearly prostrate, you stare at the uneven tile floor, an undulating plain dimpled with fetid pools and veined with rotting grout. Blinking past the pulsing buzz of the fluorescence glaring overhead, your gaze lands on the lurid plea sharpied above the toilet paper dispenser. For a good time, call 555-0169, another physical necessity. Probing your fingers into tight jean pockets, you retrieve your phone to look at your hookup's dating profile. You've never done this before. Under the prying eyes and small minds of small-town neighbors, you never could. You wouldn't have agreed to the date if they weren't so detached from that life, but 200 miles is a long way for doubt to fester. Only an hour out now, closer than you've ever been. Not that it matters. Once you're done here, you're headed back home. You may be more than 100 miles away, but you carry your home with you, the weight of all those lives and all those watchful eyes. Somewhere on the road, the depravity that had gripped so unforgivingly had released you, leaving only the sickening sensation of self-loathing and the rising sense of urgency percolating from below. Clenching as the last of the secretions drain, you try desperately to hold back that last bit of bloating pressure, not wanting your discomfort to be heard. You can't. The sound of your body relieving itself trumpets between warm cheeks and cold porcelain. You feel the hot eyes of judgment beaming down from the lights above, but you realize you're alone. You look up at the ceiling. All this fuss just for the fluorescent lights? You stare for a moment, like you're trying to discern the figures hidden beyond sight. Then, like you've never been alone a moment in your life, you let loose with one more fart. Back in the car, still drying your hands on the legs of your jeans and chuckling to yourself, you pull out your phone and text your date. Be there in an hour.
Okay, thank you. First time I've had, I think, poop discussed on the show.
Yeah, well, I thought if you're going to do a piece in the bathroom, go whole hog,
So what inspired this piece?
Yeah, so when I was working on this piece, I had just been recently studying the panopticon, and I wanted to sort of capture this idea of self-surveillance in relationship to queer identities and sexuality. And I used the second person as sort of a mechanism to try to recreate that sense of self-observation. And my thinking was, if you try to make something explicitly about sex, you're going to get people who don't want to engage with it. And more than that, I wanted it to be something accessible to someone of any sexuality and from any gender. And so switching it to the bathroom and to being about pooping sort of captures that same sense of shame about our bodies that ultimately is ungrounded. We all poop. We all fart. Yeah, it's a little bit gross, but it's nothing to be ashamed of. And I think that was what I was really trying to reach at, whatever your sexuality is, wherever you're coming from, like, that's bodies, and wanting other people is never something to be ashamed for.
So eloquent. Poop farts.
Poop, farts.
Queer identity. So you wrote this for a class.
Yeah, so I actually wrote this in the last year of my undergraduate studies for creative writing. The assignment was to write something that takes place in the bathroom, in a gas station bathroom.
Specific.
Specific, very specific, which is a really fun prompt, and I wanted to tackle head on the one thing I felt confident no one else was going to touch on, which was pooping. Gotta make use of the space, you know?
So could you talk more about pride over one's body and just feeling comfortable in one's body?
Yeah, I think that's something that I've struggled with a lot. You know, I'm standing up, I'm 6'4". I had a full beard when I was like 13 years old. I've never felt like I looked like the person who I perceived myself to be, and that can make it really difficult to sort of take pride in who you are and take pride in your appearance. And I think especially in today's culture with the internet, with social media, we are bombarded with ideas of perfection. And I think that can make it really hard to be proud of your body if you are not in that narrow idea of what society says is beautiful. And I think that it's something that I take as a challenge every day when I go outside. When I first started transitioning so many years ago, what I told myself is, hey, you know, if I am clearly trans, if I'm 6'4", if I got a little stubble, so what? I'm beautiful, and for every person out there is going to look at me and go, ugh, there's however many other people are going to look at me and have that extra bit of confidence of, hey, she did it, so can I. And I think that's so important, to normalize being normal, looking however you want to look.
Yeah. I really appreciate what you said about confidence, because that's something that can be so hard to develop and maintain, be consistent about.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie and say I'm super confident all the time. I mean, I definitely fretted about my outfit this morning and every other day.
You look great.
Thank you. I think that confidence, I mean, it's sort of like bravery isn't about not being scared. It's about challenge, like rising to that challenge. And I don't think I'm that self-confident of a person, but I try to perform that confidence, because I think that takes you a long way in life and with other people. And ultimately, you're not helping anyone by being caught up in your own sort of self-conscious behaviors, you know?
So you are a writer, evidently, and you won a prize at Virginia Commonwealth University.
I won a writing award for my creative nonfiction for a piece called, oh geez, now I'm going to blank on the name of this piece.
Something Star.
Second Star to the Right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a really fun story. Well, like story, you know, story of my life, I guess. Yeah, back when I was 18 years old, I got a speeding ticket on the Capitol Beltway going 115 and a 55.
Brave.
Well, something. I think it was less bravery and more just the childish recklessness of like, so what if I flip this car? But yeah, I had already had a pretty lengthy record of speeding at that time, and they wanted to give me jail time.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was something where the judge described it as they were giving me it was like 8 months of jail time suspended on good behavior. And so it was something where they were going to do a background check on me in a year. And if anything came up, if I had any more speeding tickets, if I had done anything, I'd have to serve that jail time. But if I kept my nose clean for a year, they would commute that jail time for community service hours instead, and another fine. And my lawyer advised me that I'm not on probation. No one's told me I can't leave the state, and their background checks do not go that far. So I might as well just make myself scarce for a little while. And I found a job as an au pair and moved to Australia for a year.
It's pretty exciting.
It was a lot of fun. It was definitely a big life experience. I don't think I'll ever go back.
So you used the word perform earlier because you were talking about performing confidence. So you're also a performer. Could you talk about your experiences as a performer?
Yeah, it's something that I feel like I'm having to return to now after a long period of time. I think that transitioning can make casting very difficult. But
Boo! Boo to them.
Yeah, cast more trans women. No, but it was something where I think when I was very young, I struggled with like a stutter. I was very shy, and it was something that I got put in to take me out of my shell, and it worked. I did theater all through like elementary, middle school, high school, and then afterwards I did community theater, and in community college I did theater, and then somewhere after that I started looking different, and that it just became a little bit dysphoric trying to put on one face or another for an audition, and like if I can't get a role as a woman, then I have to perform masculinity if I want a role as a man, and then do I even want a role as a man? So yeah, I think it's something where, performance and performance of gender is something that has been with me all my life.
What do you think your background as a performer gives your writing?
That's a really good question. I think that the way I write, I often focus on characters. I think something that a director once taught me for a show is they had me write out an entire script and write out for each of my lines, what blocking, what physically am I doing in this line, who am I speaking to, and more importantly, like what was my motivation in that scene and what was my motivation for that specific line. And I think that sort of granular level of looking at a character and trying to understand why they're doing what they're doing or why they're saying what they're doing is something that has really fueled my writing and how I write characters.
What sort of things are you writing now?
Yeah, so I'm working on a few different projects. I'm way too ADD to try to focus on one project at a time.
Relatable.
I have a few poems that I've been working on. I have a few short stories, mostly a lot of speculative fiction. I write a lot of sci-fi and fantasy. That's my true love. I think the more literary side of things I write tends to be more like, this was a poem at one point and then it became a short story, or this was creative nonfiction and then I decided, what if we made it weirder? But yeah, I think that the writing that I really do for myself and for the passion of it often ends up being very speculative in nature.
Why do you think that is?
I think that I do a lot of exploring on the page. I think that in a lot of ways I'm trying to grasp at the things that I can't understand or want to communicate within my own life. And I think that especially with a lot of like the harder to talk about subjects, it can be a lot more approachable by taking it out of that context, by instead of talking about literally what we're talking about, creating this sort of elaborate circumstance of whatever speculative elements you're using in the story, using lies to speak to truth.
Do you think you're going to go back to performing?
I would love to. I think that I'm in a place in my life where in my transition, where I feel like I can audition for the roles that I would want. And I'd be really excited to get back up on that stage.
Yeah, so what kind of roles would you want?
I've always been a fan of comedic roles. I think that, they've always been my favorite to play. In particular, there was a show that I did in high school that was like, honestly, it was like from the 1920s, and it was British, and it was very dry, and like this was not the right audience for this play. But then I had this character that came into like in the third act of this like 3-hour-long play and was the comedic relief character who was American. And I feel like I never recovered from that. That was so much fun. Like the entire time it was just crickets in the audience for 2 hours, and then I came on stage and I was like every other line of that third act was me, and it was laughter, and that I mean, you know how it is. When you're getting those laughs on stage, that's drugs. That fuels you. And I think I'll be chasing that high forever.
Yeah, and now you live in New York City, so auditioning.
It's exciting.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where, like, I feel like as a writer, I've had to inoculate myself so thoroughly to rejection, and I think that skill is going to serve me well going into the world of auditions.
Yeah. Can you talk about how you deal with rejection?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of ways I deal with rejection ultimately. I think that one of the big ones for me is you really have to accept that not every journal is going to be the right fit for you. Not every editor who's reading it is going to be the right fit for your piece. I think that it's important to understand that it's a journey and you have to just keep going at it. And the fact that your piece wasn't accepted this time doesn't mean that it's not good or that you're not worthy as a writer. And that sounds so simple of like, yeah, don't take it personally. And it's a difficult to actually accomplish, but it is just that simple of like, you have to just keep pushing at it. You have to have that thick skin of being able to take the feedback and not just fall apart. But more than that, every time I get a rejection, I pull that up, I print out that piece, and I edit it again.
Good for you.
Yeah. I don't think there's such a thing as a finished work. And I think that's something that I really learned with like studying poetry and stuff. I don't think any piece is ever finished. You might reach a point where it's good enough to submit, you feel, and you start submitting it. But then if you get those rejections, work on it. And I think that it's important not to take rejection as a personal attack or a personal failure. Just keep working harder. If it's a story that you care about, get it to where it needs to be.
You have another work to read.
I do. I had another one. This one I don't have written down. I'll just read it off my phone. I know, screens.
Love the phone.
Love the phone. Oh, gotta have the flippy phone. All right. So this is a poem titled The Pit. Every fistful of dirt dug from beneath your feet goes somewhere, goes to the top, to that wall of unearthed soil lining the edges of your pit, that wall that seems to say, every step down will be 2 steps back up. At first you dug just to go somewhere different, anywhere but here. You dropped to your knees, your hands sunk down into unforgiving soil, that all too familiar grit clinging under fingernails. Cool damp enveloped you. Earthen walls promised safety, promised escape. At the very least, maybe somewhere new. Anywhere but here. Once you found splendor and the vastness of the world. Last you crawled out onto that expanse you could not have been more filled with wonder. But the passion ran stale. You returned to old comforts. You returned to the pit. As you progressed downward, that comfort fled, reduced to claustrophobic dread of being stuck. But you dug on, because going down is easier than going up. And because you felt it still, in the earthen walls all around you, that looming presence, all the things that drove you down, towering overhead, and you were not yet ready to face them. Now, when it seems as though the sun is but a distant flickering candle, and your aching hands caked in blood and grime still drag through frigid gravel, you dig, because you have long forgone any hope of ever having the strength to climb back out again. And anywhere is better than here. So on you will go, into the depths, onward, towards the void. But when hands scrape bedrock, eyes will turn upward to that distant star, and again you will think, anywhere but here.
Thank you for reading that. What does comfort mean to you?
Oh, what does comfort mean to me? I don't know. I think that comfort means different things to me at different times in my life. I think that when I was young, comfort meant being anywhere other than where I was. Comfort was escape. Comfort was turning off for a little while if you can, you know? I think that I've definitely come a long way since then. I think these days for me, Comfort is a nice, quiet evening at home, not having a million one things that I'm not doing. Comfort is a clean kitchen. Actually, I'll say that. Comfort is a clean kitchen. Yeah. Wow.
That is a comfort.
Yeah.
Why did you write that piece?
Yes, this is a piece that's been pretty close to my heart. The first time I wrote it, I was in high school and I was in a psych ward after having attempted suicide once. And I was in a horrible, horrible place. And it was written in crayon because we couldn't have sharp pencils. On
In
a piece
crayon?
written in crayon. On sheaves of paper, and ultimately had to throw all those away. I didn't get to keep any of that, and it's something where it's been written and discarded and written over again, however many times since then. And I think it's only been recently, a couple years ago, I pulled it out again, looked at it, I was like, I want to keep working on this again. And I think that goes back to sort of my ethos of a piece is never finished,
Why weren't you allowed to keep papers from that time?
Oh, that was just something that was a parents' thing. They threw away everything I brought home with me.
Okay.
All the silly little friendship bracelets and stuff. They thought it'd be depressing to keep those kinds of things.
Okay. I thought maybe it was a policy of the institution. I was like, that doesn't seem fair.
No. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you normally perform that piece?
Yeah, I love it because I have this whole little shtick. So it's written on short lines, and so the poem actually comes out to like 72 lines long. And I'll take like 10 sheaves of paper and like tape them up or staple them end to end and fold them like an accordion. And I'll like hand write so I can space out the lines really far to fill 10 sheets. So I'll come up stage and I'll like be holding this little piece of paper and I'll be like, this is going to be quick and painless. And then I let the whole thing like unravel down to my feet. And I always think that gets a nice little laugh from the audience. And like, especially with how not dark, but like depressing the poem is, I like being able to give people that little laugh before coming into the more depressing side of it.
Why do you like giving them that little laugh?
I think that, on one hand, it's, a little bit of karma, like
Yeah.
I'm putting out a little bit of sadness into the world. I love to put out a little bit of happiness too. And like the poem is at the end of the day, hopeful, but I feel like it is a hope that's drenched in tragedy.
Oh, what a phrase. You must be a writer.
Yeah, but I think other than that, I think it gets the crowd engaged. I think that oftentimes as an audience member, we kind of lean away from something that personal and something that depressing. And I think that when you get an audience to laugh for you first, it gets them more into it, gets them more engaged.
Right.
And even if you pull the rug out from them on the next second, they're listening now.
Now that you are in New York, I'm coming back to that. Do you have an interest in participating in live events for poetry and fiction? Or do you want to be more of a writer for the page?
Both.
Yeah,
I think,
whatever.
whatever.
Give it to me.
I don't know. There are very few like forms of art that I would be like, no, I don't want to do that. I want to be able to do everything. And I think that especially with poetry, to me, like that one with the pit, I feel like I wrote that one to be read out loud.
Right.
I think when you look at it on a page, it's a slog. It's a big long like column of words. And I think that there is something to be said about the oral format. And I think there will always be poems that are better spoken out loud. And same thing with writing, like that little 250-word little story I said at the beginning. Sure, that can go on a page, but like it's a few paragraphs. I think that the 5-10 minutes of spoken word can be a lot more powerful.
Mm-hmm. So with the writing and with the performance, I'm curious about playwriting because that's not something I know about you as an artist. Is that something that you have done? Is that something that you want to try? I know you just said, oh, I'll try it. I want to do it all.
Anything.
But I'm curious about any forays you've made into that.
Yeah, that's actually one of the few, I feel like, veins of writing I have not explored. And you're actually not even the first person I feel like who's asked me recently about script writing.
Subtle hint.
Subtle hint. Give it a shot. Give it a shot. Yeah, it's hard. I don't know. Like I can be very overly verbose, and I think limiting myself to dialogue is going to be a big challenge for me. I think that I don't know, my personal belief is that I think script writing is some of the hardest writing there is. I think that to be able to create a scene with only dialogue takes so much skill. And it's absolutely something that I'd be interested in. Like writing for the screen, I think that sounds like a whole nother beast that I'm not sure I would know how to tackle as someone who's never worked on like a film set before. But I think with my having done a lot of theater, I feel like I could tackle script writing.
Okay, so we are coming to the end, and I'm curious about what you're excited about now.
Oh, well, I mean, we've sort of danced around it, but I've just moved to New York from Richmond, Virginia. I've been here for about a month now. So, I mean, everything. I'm excited for everything.
Just life.
Just life. It just keeps getting better and better. I don't know. I'm really excited to start auditioning again. I think that's something that I kind of had to put aside for a long time. And it's definitely a part of me that I let kind of wither a little bit, and it's good for me. I think that, again, talking about sort of being confident and ideas of self-consciousness and self-anxiety, I'm definitely a very anxious, self-conscious person, and I think being on the stage when I was young is what really brought me out of my shell in a lot of ways, and I think it's important to me, and I want to get back to it.
Yeah, well, I have a feeling you will. You are a go-getter in my experience knowing you, and I will quickly give viewers a plug for your writing on quailbellmagazine.com, quail like the bird, bell like the object you ring, magazine.com. You have written some fabulous things, including artist interviews for Enclave Arts Alliance that have been beloved. And we are all thrilled to see what you do next. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dear viewers, you've been watching Badass Lady Folk. I'm your host, Christine Stoddard. Tune in next time. Bye.